Hey guys, tonight we're going to explore a dark secret, a story hidden behind some of history's most powerful portraits. When you picture King Henry VIII of England, you probably think of a strong king, a man of power and desire. But what if there was something else behind that majestic appearance? A silent war, a disease that consumed the body and mind, known as syphilis. Sickness spares no one, not even those who wear a crown. Syphilis, a terrible infectious disease of the era, not only caused physical pain but also carried deep shame. It was a curse, a stain that no one wanted to admit to. And in this special video, we'll delve into the lives of 5 monarchs who had to battle this disease, with a focus on Henry VIII, a man whose cruelty, paranoia, and even the collapse of his dynasty may have stemmed from the disease itself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'm curious, where are you tuning in from tonight? And what time is it where you are? Let me know in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine a dimly lit chamber, where the only sound is the soft hiss of candle flames and the distant susurrus of silk across stone floors, lulling you toward a gentle reverie. In such a hushed world, toward the end of the 15th century, a new and dreadful visitor arrived. Syphilis. First whispered of around the year 1500, it made its mark in the great city of Milan by 1513. Contemporary accounts record that in the French invasion of Naples, over 10,000 soldiers, 10,000 unwitting carriers fell ill with pockmarks, fevers, and deep, unhealing sores called chancres. Within half a decade, the disease had spread from Italy's courts to its camps, then northward into France, Germany, Spain, and beyond, crossing borders with the inexorable certainty of history's most relentless tide. Syphilis, known variously as the French disease in Italy, the Italian disease in France, and the Spanish disease in Germany, differed from all maladies before it. Caused by the spiral bacterium Treponema pallidum, it struck without warning. Records from as early as 1520 describe entire garrison towns where 1 out of every 3 men displayed its scars. Ships arriving in Lisbon reported crews ravaged by fever and rash. Venetian ambassadors wrote of noble women hiding swollen lymph nodes beneath gloves. The contagion moved silently through courts adorned with gold and marble, sparing neither prince nor pauper. Into this fearful landscape ascended Henry VIII of England, born 1491 and crowned in the spring of 1509. His accession at age 17 was celebrated with grand pageantry, yet behind every triumphal arch and festive banner lay whispers of a more intimate anguish. Did Henry himself suffer from syphilis? The evidence, though fragmentary, is compelling. Court physicians recorded mysterious ulcers on his legs, sinister sores. One scribe noted followed by bouts of fever that left him weak and irritable. Private letters speak of late-night consultations with the king's personal leech, where mercury vapor hung heavy in the air, stinging lungs and scorching skin. Though no royal chronicle names the disease outright, those within the inner circle referred to it as the royal malady, a curse that could undermine both body and throne. Syphilis in the royal court did more than ravage flesh and bone. It slowly eroded the very foundations of dynastic authority and spiritual legitimacy. When the first signs, tiny crimson spots, almost imperceptible at a glance, marred the flawless skin of palace figures, courtiers were issued strict orders to conceal every trace. Whispered alerts passed between ladies in waiting and court physicians like clandestine signals in the night. At sumptuous banquets, the queen might find herself relegated to a shadowed alcove, her delicate hands sheathed in ivory gloves to mask telltale sores, while the emperor sat veiled behind a waxen mask sculpted to camouflage the pockmarks that blemished his jaw. Each gesture of secrecy served as both a safeguard and a shackle, binding the royal family ever tighter in a web of hushed dread and unspoken shame. Treating syphilis among the elite proved one of the era's most perilous medical gambits. Mercury, hailed as the miracle cure, was in truth a merciless toxin. Physicians recommended inhaling its vapors in stifling steam chambers, submerging the body in mercury baths, or swallowing tinctures laced with powdered metal. Wisps of metallic fog curled through royal chambers, filling the lungs with corrosive haze. Patients gasped through ulcerated gums as their minds drifted into delirium. Many did not succumb to the pox itself, but to acute mercury poisoning kidneys, collapsing, liver tissue wasting away, and often a final, silent exit within the palace walls. Each treatment, intended to restore health, edged the sufferer closer to a far more deadly fate. The culture of silence and concealment only compounded the tragedy. The inner court became a breeding ground for rumors that spread like wildfire among anxious tongues. They say the queen retreats to her chambers at midnight to sweat in mercury fumes, one courtier whispered over candlelight. Our king hides his festering foot lest the public glimpse his weakness, murmured another behind silken fans. Such idle talk quickly transformed into lethal political ammunition. Foreign envoys, eager to undermine the realm, peddled scandalous tidings throughout European salons. Letters in cipher hinted at a sovereign's failing health and speculated on the perilous consequences should the throne fall into disrepair. These covert insinuations not only tarnished the monarch's reputation but threatened the delicate balance of alliances, turning private affliction into a matter of statecraft. It is within this atmosphere of fear and subterfuge that 5 emblematic royal narratives emerge, tales in which syphilis left its indelible mark not only on royal cadavers but on the annals of politics and the secret histories whispered behind closed doors. From the French king whose siege of Naples was shattered not by cannon fire but by the horrific sweep of the Great Plague, to the English sovereign whose 6 marriages produced only one surviving son, from the Russian Tsar whose mercurial rages became legend, to the monarch of Navarre consumed in mythical flames, the tragedies of these rulers weave a darker tapestry of power and vulnerability. Each of these 5 stories offers a window into the shadowed interplay of disease and dominion. The derailed campaign in southern Italy reveals how an epidemic could decimate armies and rewrite military doctrines. The English king's tragic lineage underscores how personal affliction could reshape dynastic succession and spark religious upheaval. The Tsar's unbridled fits of anger, fueled by neural complications, illustrate how illness twisted temperament into terror. The fiery demise of Navarre's ruler, shrouded in both literal and symbolic conflagration, speaks to the dramatic ways legends grow around suffering. And the case of lesser-known court figures, whose fates were quietly recorded in dusty tomes and secret correspondence, reminds us that for every crowned head, there were countless courtiers whose lives were equally defined by this relentless scourge. In the hush of palace corridors and the smoke of mercury chambers, the story of syphilis and sovereignty unfolds, a haunting chronicle of power laid low by invisible forces. The first person to contract syphilis was King Charles VIII of France. The Neapolitan curse. King Charles VIII of France was born on the 30th of June, 1470, the second son of King Louis XI and Queen Charlotte of Savoy. His paternal grandparents were Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, and Isabella of Bourbon, while his maternal grandparents were Amadeus IX, Duke of Savoy, and Yolande of Valois. He had 2 elder sisters, Princess Anne, later Duchess of Bourbon, and Princess Joan, who oversaw his early regency after he ascended the throne at the tender age of 12, upon his father's death in 1483. His reign endured until 1498, a span of 15 years marked by soaring ambition, breathtaking triumphs, and tragic misfortunes. In the spring of 1495, King Charles VIII launched what he hoped would be a spectacular conquest of Naples. His army gleamed beneath polished armor, vibrant pennons snapping in the breeze, and noble steeds pawed the earth in eager anticipation. From the break of dawn, the French camps hummed with the promise of swift victory. Yet within weeks of crossing the Alps, an invisible enemy struck. Soldiers erupted in agonizing sores, tiny crimson spots that quickly swelled into deep, oozing ulcers. The stench of infection seeped through makeshift infirmaries, and physicians, confounded by the disease's ferocity, labeled it the mysterious Italian sickness. Entire regiments were felled not by sword or pike, but by this unseen scourge. Tales spread of soldiers collapsing into unmarked graves, corpses heaped in chaotic piles as their groans haunted the corridors of tents. Physicians hastily resorted to mercury, the era's infamous remedy, vaporizing it in steam chambers or administering it in poisonous baths. Yet the cure often proved as deadly as the malady. Mercurial vapors scorched lungs, shattered nerves, and left many weakened soldiers gasping for breath in delirium. Refusing to abandon his men, King Charles VIII himself succumbed. Ulcerations appeared upon his thigh, hidden beneath sumptuous robes. Under cover of darkness, he endured clandestine mercury treatments, each inhalation plunging him deeper into haze and agony. Upon his return to France, he concealed his suffering behind a wax mask, its pale surface stark against his once rosy cheeks. His gait, once buoyant with royal confidence, grew heavy and cautious. Courtiers observed the hollow pallor of his visage and the tremor that sometimes seized his hand. In the spring of 1498, tragedy struck when he struck his head upon a low beam in the chateau of Amboise. Official chronicles record the incident as an accident, yet whispered legends insist that his body, already ravaged by the so-called Neapolitan curse, could not withstand the blow. On that fateful day, the throne of France fell silent, as its youthful monarch drew his final breath. Beyond the drama of his demise, King Charles VIII left a mixed legacy. He modernized the French administration, strengthening royal authority and reforming the currency to stabilize the realm's finances. His Italian campaign, though marred by disease, extended French influence into the peninsula and paved the way for future Valois ambitions. He also patronized the arts and letters, funding architectural projects and attracting scholars, thus fostering a brief renaissance in northern Europe. Yet darker shadows cloud his memory. His impulsive ambition overextended the military, draining the treasury and stretching supply lines dangerously thin. His reliance on youthful zeal over experienced counsel cost countless lives. The dreaded maladie française, or French disease, not only decimated his armies, but tarnished his nation's reputation across Europe. Rumors of his declining health were wielded as political weapons by rival courts, undermining French prestige. Moreover, his failure to produce an heir plunged the succession into uncertainty until his cousin ascended as King Louis XII. In the hushed corridors of history, the image of King Charles VIII endures as both visionary and cautionary figure. Draped in royal robes, his eyes once sparkled with conquest's allure, yet they later bore the hollow gaze of a man haunted by invisible wounds. His story reminds us that no throne, however exalted, can guard against the frailties of flesh and the inexorable grip of fate. And so, as candlelight flickers over worn chronicles, the legend of King Charles VIII lingers, an elegy to ambition, mortality, and the perilous interplay of power and plague. King Henry VIII of England, the second monarch to contract syphilis, the hidden ailment. As dusk descends upon the Tudor court, and the faint glow of candlelight dances upon the tapestries, we turn our weary gaze to King Henry VIII of England, the eighth monarch bearing that name. Renowned for 6 royal marriages, the dramatic break from the Roman Church, and a suite of ruthless policies. Yet beyond his gilded chambers lay a secret adversary far more insidious than any rebel army, Syphilis, cloaked in silence within the hush of palace walls. From the late 1520s onward, the court's medical records began to note an ailment they called the mysterious fever. Gentlemen whispered that the king's legs bore sores that refused to heal, and that searing pain often forced him to limp away from council meetings. Officially, his physicians recorded only recurrent ulcers and early joint inflammation, carefully omitting the dreaded word syphilis, for to utter it was to risk unraveling the very fabric of royal prestige. In the original dispatches, no physician dared to write syphilis by name, an ironclad cover-up worthy of a spy's code. Instead, the Spanish ambassador, Eustace Chapies, hinted in his letters at declining health, legs so swollen and painful that His Majesty finds movement arduous. Within the inner chambers, ladies in waiting spoke in hushed tones of Queen Catherine, her eyes heavy with sorrow as she watched her husband hobble through secret antechambers. Meanwhile, court doctors administered brutal remedies, mercury vapours in suffocating steam tents and arsenic-laced ointments that crept beneath the skin. The old warning rang through palace rumour: one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Those who survived such treatments often paid the price. Teeth lost to decay, kidneys failing in agony, and breath tainted with metal's rancid tang. Syphilis gnawed not only at Henry's flesh but at his mind. Once a vigorous prince beloved of courtly sports, he transformed over the years into a man haunted by paranoia, prone to sudden rages and cruel punishments of loyal counsellors. His once robust laughter faded into muttered suspicions of hidden conspirators. Even his queen's tragic miscarriages, tiny, nameless souls lost to the cold floor, were whispered to stem from congenital transmission of the pox, compounding the king's grief and fueling turmoil over a male heir. By the 19th century, historians of medicine pored over Tudor accounts and confidently diagnosed King Henry VIII with syphilis. Yet modern scholars remain divided. Some point to the telltale sores and psychological decline as clear evidence. Others argue that his symptoms align more closely with chronic diabetes or the lasting effects of a head wound sustained during a 1536 jousting accident. Still, the legend of the ailing king endures, entwining syphilis forever. With Henry's image, a portrait of power marred by hidden affliction. Day after day, the king's court witnessed the toll of his disease. Council tables once bright with diplomatic negotiations grew sombre as Henry's frailty became impossible to hide. Advisors tiptoed around his unpredictable temper, fearful that a misstep might cost them both favour and life. Foreign ambassadors exchanged coded glances, noting how the crimson puddles beneath royal rugs bore witness to his suffering. Each new ulcer, each tremor in his hand, fed the undercurrent of dread that pulsed through every gilded corridor. And yet, even as the illness gnawed away at his vitality, King Henry VIII pressed onward with grand designs. He fortified naval forces, laying groundwork for England's future maritime supremacy. He commissioned majestic palaces, Whitehall, Greenwich, and Nonsuch, meant to rival continental courts in splendour. He sponsored scholars and translated sacred texts, cementing his vision of a sovereign both pious and learned. All the while, his hidden ailment remained the court's most dangerous secret. In his final years, the king's gait slowed to a painful shuffle. His once handsome visage grew heavy with age and illness. The court's laughter became a distant echo. Physicians experimented with ever more toxic concoctions, hoping to wrest control from the disease even as they risked hastening his demise. When King Henry VIII passed into legend, he left behind a kingdom transformed politically independent of Rome, culturally vibrant, and looming on the cusp of empire. Yet his legacy bore a darker stain. The whispered knowledge that beneath royal robes, behind closed doors, lay the ravages of an invisible plague. So, as candlelight dims and the night deepens, we close our eyes on the story of King Henry VIII of England, a monarch of fierce will and fractured health, whose secret struggle with syphilis shaped not only his reign, but the fate of a nation. In the hush of history, his tale drifts on like a soft sigh, a reminder that even the mightiest crown cannot conceal the frailty of the human flesh. Ivan IV of Russia, the third monarch to contract syphilis, the Mad Tsar. As twilight falls over the ancient ramparts of the Kremlin, a hush descends upon the court, and we turn our drowsy remembrance to Ivan IV of Russia, known to history as the Terrible, and here in whispers as the Mad Tsar. Crowned in the year 1547 as the first ruler to bear the title Tsar of all the Russias, his iron fist shaped the realm until the year 1584. Yet, in the final years of his reign, a hidden scourge crept behind palace walls, twisting flesh and mind alike. Ivan's earlier days suggested a sovereign of remarkable promise. Son of a grand prince murdered in intrigue, he ascended the throne as a young boy, guided at first by regents and scholars. Over decades, he forged a centralized state, codified laws, and expanded Russian territory with resolute ambition. But as his power grew, so too did his capacity for cruelty. He unleashed the Oprichnina, massacring boyars by the thousands, torturing prisoners with methods so savage that even the harsh Russian winter paled in comparison. In the darkest nights, his own hand struck down his son in a fit of rage, a deed that cast a long, sorrowful shadow over his legacy. In those final seasons, chroniclers recorded a new, more dreadful transformation. Documented seizures, agonizing headaches, and vivid hallucinations haunted his whispered memos. Some scribes blamed fits of madness or crude epilepsy, yet court medical notes reveal that Ivan underwent repeated mercury vapors to treat what was discreetly called the leprous affliction of the skin, a veiled reference to syphilis. Mercurial steam, thick and oppressive, filled hidden chambers, meant to purge his body but often leaving him weaker still, rattled by tremors and mental fog. Then, in 1963, researchers exhumed his remains from the tomb of the Archangel Michael. Laboratory analysis uncovered abnormally high levels of mercury within his skull and teeth. Though this could signify embalming practices or cosmetic use of toxic white face paint, the neurological signs seem far more telling. His late-life symptoms, hallucinations of ghostly armies, cyclical paralysis known as paresis, and violent seizures align closely with the final stage of neurosyphilis. Chronicles speak of nights when Ivan would tear at his own beard and hair, pound his head against the palace walls, and howl at visions no one else could see. In those long, sleepless nights, the contrast between the stern autocrat and the trembling madman became legend. At daybreak, courtiers tiptoed through frost-chilled corridors, exchanging secret intelligence of the royal malady. They spoke of distant shrieks echoing from beneath the Tsar's chamber door, and of hurried scribes delivering coded missives regarding his condition. Outside the Kremlin, Muscovite citizens whispered prayers for their Tsar's salvation, even as they feared the unpredictable wrath that might fall upon them. Late neurosyphilis ravages the nervous system with merciless precision. Unchecked, it brings convulsions, memory loss, and a shifting personality drenched in paranoia. For Ivan, already scarred by childhood terror and the spectre of betrayal, the disease magnified every fear and every violent impulse. A ruler who once led triumphant armies found himself cowering from phantoms at the stroke of midnight. His decrees grew more erratic, his punishments more arbitrary, and his court more isolated, as if the very walls recoiled from the echoes of his torment. Modern historians, poring over both medical forensics and period accounts, now debate the extent to which neurosyphilis fueled his atrocities. Some argue that his innate brutality simply found new expression under the weight of disease. Others maintain that terror and trauma from his youth were the true roots of his cruelty, with illness serving only as an accelerant. Regardless, the tale of Ivan IV stands as a grim testament to the hidden ravages of syphilis within royal bloodlines. So, as the embers of the hearth grow dim and we drift towards slumber, let us recall Tsar Ivan IV of Russia, once a vision of imperial might, later a figure of tragic madness. In his story lies a restless warning that even the most formidable crown cannot shield against the ravages of secret afflictions. May his haunted legacy linger softly in our thoughts, a lullaby of power's peril and the quiet, unyielding march of disease. King Charles II of Navarre, the fourth monarch to contract syphilis, the flame of retribution. As twilight softens the battlements of Navarre's ancient castles, and the hush of evening settles over mist-kissed valleys, we turn our heavy-lidded gaze to King Charles II of Navarre, known to history as Charles the Wicked, whose secret affliction would become legend. Born in the year 1332, he ascended the throne at the tender age of 17, upon his father's passing in 1349, ruling until his death in 1387. Yet beneath the regal robes and the weighty crown lay a hidden torment that would transform his legacy into a tale of divine vengeance. In his early years, King Charles II exhibited the sharp wit and cunning that earned him both respect and fear among his peers. He navigated the treacherous politics of 15th century Europe with skill, forging alliances and outwitting rivals at court. Yet even as he negotiated treaties and marshalled armies, whispers circulated of a creeping malaise afflicting his flesh. Courtiers spoke in subdued tones of painful sores, tiny ulcers that began as mere irritations, but soon deepened into raw wounds on his arms and legs. Physicians, bound by royal decree to maintain silence, recorded only a vague entry of severe cutaneous disease, never daring to invoke the dreaded name of syphilis for fear of shattering the monarch's prestige. One fateful night, as King Charles II lay swathed in healing linens soaked with pungent salves, a single candle fell upon the edge of his pallet. The woolen wrappings, saturated with medicinal oils, burst into flame with a crackling fury. In that hazy midnight chamber, the king awoke to searing heat and the stench of burning cloth soothed only by terror. Flames licked at his legs, consuming flesh already weakened by disease, and his agonized cries echoed through the vaulted corridors. Servants, roused by the horror, struggled to smother the blaze, but not before the fire had taken its devastating toll. Though he survived the immediate inferno, King Charles II bore the scars of that night, both physical and spiritual, for the remainder of his days. Centuries later, chroniclers of the 15th and 16th centuries began to weave syphilis into the narrative of his demise. As the pox spread across Europe, moralists seized upon his tragic end as a cautionary exemplar. They described the ulcers as festering lesions that clung to the linen wrappings, fueling the inferno that consumed the king's chamber. To the common folk, Charles became both tyrant and penitent. His cruelty in life matched by the merciless punishment of his body and soul in death. Through these vivid accounts, the image of the wicked king burned by his own sin took root in collective memory. No contemporary medical record confirms that King Charles II truly suffered from syphilis. Yet the legend itself reveals the power of narrative to transform disease into moral reckoning. In Renaissance medical manuscripts, his story was invoked alongside anatomical diagrams of ulcerated flesh, accompanied by the admonition, "Let this royal fate warn you vice seers as cruelly as flame." Scholars debated whether the leprous affliction was simply a painful skin condition or a euphemism for something far graver. Still, the tale endured, a dark parable of sin, punishment, and the inescapable judgment of history. Within the inner court, whispers of the king's tormented nights circulated among advisors and ladies in waiting. They spoke of secret care chambers, where mercury ointments and arsenic poultices were applied beneath lanterns' flicker, each remedy laced with its own peril. They remembered the panic when the linen caught fire, the frantic scramble of servants, and the hush that followed his ravaged screams. In hushed tones they called it the flame of retribution, convinced that divine wrath had been kindled by the king's misdeeds and fueled by his hidden transgressions. Through the ages, King Charles II of Navarre became the archetype of the ruler whose cruelty summoned supernatural justice. Poets and playwrights evoked his fiery end as dramatic spectacle, while moralists cited it in sermons to condemn excess and ambition. Even as modern historians question the historicity of syphilis in his case, they acknowledge the enduring resonance of his legend. His story reminds us that disease, whether real or imagined, can be wielded as a tool of propaganda, transforming flesh into metaphor and history into myth. And so, as lanterns gutter in Navarre's deserted ramparts, we close our eyes upon the memory of King Charles II, once a sovereign of cunning and ambition, later a figure consumed by both pestilence and flame. In the gentle hush before sleep, his tale lingers as a lullaby of warning, that unchecked power may kindle its own blaze, and that the secrets we hide within our flesh may one day burst into the open, scorching all we hold dear. King Alfonso XIII of Spain, the fifth monarch to contract syphilis, the secret beneath the crown. In the gentle hush of the 20th century, as modern medicine quietly blossomed behind palace walls, King Alfonso XIII of Spain ascended the throne in the year 1902. At the tender age of 16, following the regency of his mother, Queen Maria Cristina, his reign stretched until 1931, spanning nearly 3 decades of tumultuous politics and extravagant court life. Yet beneath the opulent facade of grand palaces and glittering court ceremonies lay a silent affliction, syphilis, wrapped in secrecy and whispered about only in the shadowed corridors of power. Throughout the teens and 20s, King Alfonso XIII cultivated a reputation for lavish parties and numerous romantic liaisons, his name ever on the lips of society's most audacious gossip columns. By 1910, tabloid headlines began to murmur of a strange skin malady afflicting His Majesty, though no official statement ever confirmed the nature of his distress. Physicians, sworn to absolute discretion by royal decree, recorded only a vague notation of cutaneous anomalies, deliberately avoiding mention of the dreaded pox. Yet the keen observers of Madrid's salons noted how the king would retreat from public audiences under the pretext of fatigue or mild illness, slipping into clandestine treatment rooms where only the most trusted courtiers dared follow. In those clandestine chambers, King Alfonso XIII endured the era's archaic remedies. Days of suffocating mercury inhalations in steam cloisters and nights spent wrapped in arsenic-laced salves applied to his sores. The metallic tang of medicine clung to his breath, and his nights were punctuated by fevered dreams as the toxic compounds battled the invisible pathogen within. Royal medical staff meticulously burned their notes at dawn, fearful that a single leaked page might ignite a scandal severe enough to unsettle the very foundation of the monarchy. Whispers spread that the Queen's ladies-in-waiting concealed trays of medicated compresses behind velvet drapes, while the director of the Royal Infirmary received lavish gifts to ensure his silence. Even without formal proof, these rumors became potent political ammunition. As the 20s waned and Republican sentiment grew, King Alfonso XIII's hidden illness became a weapon wielded by his opponents. Republican pamphlets hinted of a decadent sovereign consumed by secret vice, publishing veiled insinuations that the king's weakened constitution rendered him incapable of steering Spain through its turbulent transformations. City streets bore the graffiti scrawled overnight, "No crown for a dying man." In Parliament, deputies muttered that the monarch's infirmity was the true crisis of the realm, masked only by gilded ceremonies and hollow proclamations. The nation's confidence ebbed as stories of His Majesty's pallid visage and occasional tremors reached anxious ears, even as palace bulletins continued to proclaim robust health. By 1931, mounting unrest forced King Alfonso XIII into voluntary exile. He departed Madrid under the cover of darkness, accompanied by a handful of loyal retainers and the hidden burden of his unspoken malady. Exile afforded him neither peace nor anonymity. Newspapers across Europe published lurid columns about the syphilitic king, and foreign hospitals harbored anxious eyes on the exiled monarch. His final years, lived in subdued estates beyond Spain's borders, were marked by faded grandeur and persistent ill health. Though he passed away in the year 1941, official obituaries made no reference to his lifelong struggle, choosing instead to celebrate his charitable works and the architectural projects he had once championed. The tale of King Alfonso XIII of Spain illustrates how, even in an age of scientific advancement, the stigma of disease could force royalty into shadows. Syphilis not only ravaged his body, but eroded his authority, leaving him isolated behind the ramparts of a crumbling dynasty. Yet from this tragedy emerged a powerful lesson for the 20th century: the imperative of medical confidentiality and the dangers of politicizing personal suffering. In subsequent decades, Spain would enact laws safeguarding patient privacy and invest in public health campaigns to destigmatize venereal disease, ensuring that no future sovereign or citizen would suffer in such silent dread. And so, as night's soft breath settles over royal hallways now dimmed with history's dust, the story of King Alfonso XIII drifts like a lullaby of caution. In his whispered legacy, we hear the echoes of a man whose crown could not shield him from the invisible scourge beneath his gilded throne, a reminder that even the highest seat of power can tremble before the hush of hidden affliction, and that in the quietest moments, truth must find its voice. Through personal stories, the image of syphilis in royal dynasties gradually became etched into European consciousness as a royal disease. From the 16th century onward, people dubbed the malady by the names of nations: Maladie Française for France, Mal de Naples for Italy, Mal de Espagne for Spain, Malitalia again for Italy, each title both reflecting deep prejudice and betraying a fear of invisible contagion crossing borders. Renaissance medical texts catalogued a bewildering array of treatments, yet nearly all depended on two potent poisons: mercury vapor inhalations in cramped steam chambers and arsenic-infused ointments applied to raw flesh. Both substances wrought havoc on internal organs, sometimes proving more lethal than the original pox itself, leaving patients weak and delirious beneath layers of toxic residue. In literature and the arts of that era, haunting images abounded. Portraits of nobility were often retouched to conceal imperfections. Softened brushstrokes hiding dark blotches, yet unvarnished sketches or crude etchings revealed the truth. Ulcerated flesh, hollowed cheeks, and mournful eyes that spoke of private suffering. Poets wove veiled metaphors into verses, likening decaying flesh to moral decay, while court dramas incorporated the motif of a skin-borne curse to symbolize the fall of empires and the corruption of virtue. In certain city-states, clandestine pamphlets circulated free of charge, instructing commoners on personal hygiene measures, frequent hand-washing, daily garment changes, even rudimentary disinfection of linens to stem the silent spread. These leaflets marked an early stir of public health awareness, the first tentative steps toward community medicine born of fear and necessity. Politically, whispers of a monarch stricken by a ghastly malady proved irresistible to oppositional factions. Statesmen and scribes covertly inserted insinuations into speeches, fueling popular anxiety and undermining loyalty to the crown. In response, rulers established so-called medical review councils composed of royal physicians, trusted advisors, and chamberlains, tasked with regulating all information about regal health. Marriages among royal houses began to factor in the spectre of hereditary or transmissible infirmity. Diplomatic unions, once purely strategic, were now hedged by concerns over an heir's vitality. The spectre of syphilis, fraught with risk of miscarriage, sterility, or congenital deformity, soured many betrothals, postponing or dissolving alliances that once would have seemed unassailable. Thus, the impact of syphilis extended far beyond individual agony. It served as a crucible testing monarchical stability and reputational integrity. Medical practice advanced as scholars sought safer remedies, gradually shifting from medieval superstitions toward empirical observation, albeit still shackled by toxic therapies. The need to shield personal infirmity from political exploitation spurred the earliest notions of medical confidentiality, laying groundwork for later legal protections of patient privacy. In art and literature, the disease left an indelible mark on iconography and allegory, ensuring that future generations would grapple with the complex interplay of power, shame, and mortality. And in the crucible of politics, the spectre of contagion became a potent instrument, one that could topple thrones as readily as any sword. As the centuries unfolded, syphilis evolved from whispered scandal into a catalyst for social and cultural transformation. The spectre of the royal disease prompted public education campaigns and the establishment of specialized hospitals where physicians could experiment with less destructive treatments. The concept of quarantine gained traction as authorities grappled with containing outbreaks, leading to the first regulated isolation wards and the rudimentary epidemiological records that would later underpin modern public health. Even as superstition clung to the belief in divine retribution, a nascent scientific ethos emerged, driven by the urgent need to protect both commoners and crowned heads from the ravages of a disease once thought to be confined to courtly intrigue. In the twilight hush of history's long corridor, the legacy of syphilis's royal chapter lingers like a soft lament. It reminds us that no crown, however resplendent, can wholly shield the mortal frame from unseen peril. Yet from that vulnerability came progress, laws safeguarding medical secrecy, literature grappling with human frailty, and a fledgling public health consciousness born of necessity. Though the scourge itself has been largely tamed by modern medicine, its echoes remain a cautionary lullaby that speaks of the delicate interplay between power and plague, and of the ways in which even the most private sufferings can reshape the destinies of nations. And it is precisely from those lavish tragedies of imperious monarchs that we come to understand how syphilis did more than imprison the body. It seared itself into the very lifeblood of power, leaving an indelible stain. Now, let us turn our gaze to the lesser-known shadows. The lives of 5 noble and royal women of Europe, the silent bearers of the royal disease, as we unveil each chapter of their pain-ridden and profoundly solitary histories. The first woman, Catherine de' Medici of France. Born into the illustrious banking dynasty of the Medici in the city of Florence, Catherine, later to become Queen Consort of France, entered the world in the year 1319, the daughter of Lorenzo the Elder and Ginevra de' Benci. From her earliest days, she was schooled in the arts of diplomacy, finance, and courtly etiquette, her mind sharpened by tutors who coveted her family's favour. At the age of 14, she was pledged in marriage to King Henry II of France, sealing an alliance between 2 of Europe's most formidable houses. As she departed her Tuscan childhood for the marble corridors of the Louvre, few could have foreseen the trials that lay encoded in her blood. By the middle of the 16th century, rumours began to drift through the vaulted chambers of the French court, like particles of dust in a ray of late afternoon light. Whispers told of mysterious lesions, tiny, painful ulcers emerging on Catherine's limbs. Courtiers spoke in hushed tones of furtive visits to the palace infirmary, where candlelit consultations took place behind tapestry-draped screens. It was there, concealed from prying eyes, that Catherine endured her first secret treatments. Poultices of crushed herbs, whispered prayers to saints of healing, and, most ominously, primitive forms of mercury steam baths. As the years unfolded, Catherine's symptoms deepened in their persistence. The ulcers would flare anew at the slightest provocation. A chill breeze through an open window, the friction of silken skirts against sensitive skin. Joint pain seized her knees and elbows, bending her regal posture into something more stooped and wearied. Physicians, sworn to royal secrecy, prescribed the era's most fearsome remedies. prolonged mercury vapor inhalations that left her lungs burning and arsenic-infused salves that stung the wounds, even as they sought to purge the hidden contagion. At times, she would sink into a drowsy fugue, her mind drifting like a leaf upon still water, roused only by the crackling hiss of the medicinal fumes. Yet Catherine's political life demanded a mystique of invulnerability. When her husband perished in a jousting accident in the year 1559, she assumed the regency for her young sons, a mantle heavy with both crown and obligation. Behind the gilded curtains of state council, she concealed her trembling hands and veiled her reticence with a facade of measured confidence. But those closest to her observed the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the brief hesitation before pronouncing royal decrees. The spectre of her ailment fed the paranoia that France's enemies sought to exploit any sign of weakness, especially the Huguenot faction, ever eager to challenge Valois authority. In the annals that followed, Catherine's health became inexorably tied to the darker episodes of her reign. Chroniclers of the 17th century cast her as the machine-like architect of the tragic street, Bartholomew's Day massacre, branding her the sickly queen whose own hidden infirmity mirrored the moral decay she seemingly unleashed upon Paris. Portraits of the time, replete with layers of tinted varnish and meticulous retouching, often obscured the faint discolorations on her skin, as painters sought to preserve her likeness in lines of unblemished elegance. Only in later copies and pencil sketches did the subtle depressions and scarred indentations re-emerge, reminders of the silent violence that once ravaged her flesh. Thus, the life of Catherine de' Medici of France stands as a testament to the cruel intersection of power and disease. Her body became both vessel and battleground, the hidden theatre in which poisons fought to reclaim the sovereignty her bloodline commanded. In the hush that follows the closing of these pages, we carry with us the somnolent echo of her struggle, an elegy to a queen who, even as she shaped nations, bore within her a private agony that no crown could soothe. The second woman, Louise de la Vallière. Born into a minor noble family in the year 1635, Louise de la Vallière entered the grand household of Queen Henrietta Maria as a diligent lady-in-waiting. From her earliest days at court, she moved in the hush of silken gowns and whispered confidences, learning the delicate arts of etiquette and discretion. It was there, among the soft drumbeat of hooves on cobblestone and the rustle of velvet drapes, that she first encountered the young monarch, King Charles II of England, whose magnetic charm drew her into a world of secret glances and midnight audiences. Though she never bore the title of queen, Louise became his silent favourite, a presence felt in the hush before his laughter, a shadow at the edge of every mask. By the early 1660s, rumours began to drift through the court like pale wisps of smoke. Gentlemen of the bedchamber and ladies at embroidery frames observed Louise's once rosy cheeks growing pallid, her eyes ringed with weariness. Journal entries by trusted courtiers recorded the occasional bandage glimpsed at her wrist, the furtive retreat to secluded chambers under the pretense of rest and recovery. Whispers spoke of hidden sores that no powder or rouge could mask, and of moments when the mistress of the merry monarch hid behind tapestry, folds to conceal her pain from the prying eyes of spies and rival admirers. In the secrecy of Sir John Ward's private clinic, an unmarked townhouse in a quiet lane, Louise de la Vallière sought the ministrations of trusted physicians. There, by candlelight and hushed voices, she endured the era's most dreaded therapies. The air would thicken with the acrid tang of mercury vapour as she inhaled the poisonous mist intended to purge the unseen invader within her veins. Beneath her silk shifts, artisans of the apothecary applied ointments of arsenic and mercury, wrapping her limbs in silken cloths to trap the medicine's scent and preserve the court's discretion. Each treatment left her body trembling with fevered delirium, her nights haunted by dreams of masked figures and rustling gowns. Yet even as Louise's health waned, her position at court teetered on a knife's edge. The king's favour, once lavish, cooled as other ladies caught his eye. In the year 1669, when Louise's illness could no longer be hidden, she fell from grace. Whispers of her condition, once confined to hushed circles, swelled into a chorus that undermined her standing. Under pressure from advisers who feared scandal, King Charles II offered her a choice: remain in the gilded cage of courtly favour, or seek refuge in a life of piety. Broken and weary, Louise withdrew into the Carmelite convent at Chaillot, trading the silken cushions of Whitehall for the austere stone cloisters of the nunnery. In the silent quiet of her cloister cell, Louise began a new chapter, one of reflection and penitence. Freed from the demands of court, she turned her thoughts and her pen to spiritual matters, composing treatises on sin, suffering, and the nature of redemption. Many readers and scholars later speculated that her hidden affliction had deepened her resolve, transforming private agony into a profound empathy for the suffering of others. Portraits of the ex-mistress, sketched in devotional manuscripts, depict her with downcast eyes and clasped hands, a figure whose simple habit belied the royal intrigue woven into her past. Thus, the life of Louise de la Vallière reveals how a noblewoman's silent struggle with syphilis could reshape her destiny. From the grand courts of England to the hushed cloisters of a Parisian convent, her journey traced the arc from favour to exile, from hidden pain to humble devotion. And as the night deepens around us, her story drifts on like a soft lullaby, a reminder that even amid velvet finery and royal splendour, the body's frailty can carve a path to unexpected grace. The third woman, Anna of Tyrol. Born in the year 1580, won to the princely house of Tyrol, Anna of Tyrol entered the grand tapestry of Habsburg alliances when she wed Emperor Matthias I in the year 1524. Their union, sealed in a lavish ceremony at Prague's venerable cathedral, embodied the strategic bond between the sprawling Habsburg realms and the mountainous Tyrolean territories. As empress, Anna moved among vaulted halls and candlelit chapels, her presence marked by gentle patronage of cloisters and monastic orders. She endowed convents with lands and relics, earning a reputation as a devout protector of the Church's charitable sisters, even as she navigated the intricate protocols of imperial court life. Yet beneath her satin brocades and jewelled diadem lay a concealed affliction. Court medical registers from the mid-1520s make only oblique references to a lingering, cutaneous malady, deftly avoiding the dreaded term syphilis. In the margins of her physician's ledgers, the phrase persistent skin disease appears, bracketed by Latin annotations that hint at unspeakable symptoms. Meanwhile, diplomatic dispatches to foreign courts themselves, wary of alarming news, spoke in guarded language of the empress's waning vitality during the imperial diet sessions. Envoys whispered of pale cheeks and tremulous hands as she greeted dignitaries, her posture stiff with concealed pain. To soothe the unseen scourge, Anna adhered to a regimen of treatments both grim and archaic. In the scented steam rooms of spa towns dotting the Danube's banks, she immersed herself in mercury-laced vapours drawn from mineral springs. The air, thick with the metallic tang of the element, stung her lungs and coaxed beads of sweat from her skin. Back in Prague, her private apothecary prepared secret concoctions blending arsenic tinctures with extracts of rare alpine herbs. These elixirs, administered beneath silken wraps, seeped into her flesh, their corrosive compounds battling the infection even as they threatened to unravel her strength. Each dawn found her body trembling with fevers. Each dusk ushered in restless dreams of shadowed cloisters and echoing footfalls. As Anna retreated from the public eye, court intrigue swirled about her absence. In the hush between council meetings, courtiers speculated on the reasons for her prolonged withdrawals. Some whispered that she had become the pawn of rival factions, her illness a pretext for sidelining her influence. Others claimed that her brother, the future Emperor Ferdinand II, watched with wary eyes, his loyalty tempered by ambition. The Empress's retreat into the solitude of her private chapel only fueled rumours of conspiracies between Tyrolean nobles and Habsburg power brokers. Invitations to state banquets arrived unopened, while her name, once uttered with reverence in imperial proclamations, grew conspicuously absent from court bulletins. In the year 1531, at the age of 49, Anna of Tyrol breathed her final, silent breath in the seclusion of her favourite convent cell. News of her passing swept through the empire like a soft lament, mingling sorrow with the hushed mention of her fatal lesions. In the decades that followed, Gothic storytellers wove her fate into grim novellas, scenes of the Empress wandering desolate corridors, her once regal robes trailing in pools of candlelight, her whispered prayers drowned by the echo of phantom moans. These tales cast her as a tragic figure, a saintly ruler, undone by an invisible, merciless foe. Thus, The life of Anna of Tyrol stands as a testament to the silent suffering of a queen whose devotion to faith and family was matched only by the cruelty of her hidden malady. In the soft twilight of history, her story drifts like a lullaby of lamentation, reminding us that even empresses, draped in imperial velvet, can find themselves abandoned by both courtly favour and the very health that once sustained their reign. The fourth woman, Marguerite de Valois, born in the year 1544 as the eldest daughter of Catherine de' Medici, Marguerite de Valois first graced the courts of France and Navarre as both princess and poet. In the tumultuous age of religious strife, her marriage in 1562 to Henry of Navarre, the future King Henry IV of France, was hailed as a beacon of reconciliation between Catholic and Protestant factions. As Queen Margot, she became renowned for her cultivated salons, where lyricists and philosophers gathered beneath ornate tapestries to exchange verses and ideas. Her patronage of writers and scholars lent her name to works of gentle satire and courtly romance, forging a legacy as a guardian of letters, even as the realm teetered on the brink of civil war. Yet by the latter half of the 16th century, whispers crept through those gilded gatherings, speaking of a mysterious malaise afflicting the Queen's precious form. In private memoirs later published under the guise of candour, courtiers recorded midnight consultations with physicians, shadows slipping through palace corridors to attend to what they termed a French malady. Salon guests paused mid-phrase at the sight of Marguerite's silken skirts drawn aside, revealing bandaged feet stained by small, dolorous lesions. On nights when fever flared, her elegant soirees dissolved into hushed concern, the rattle of her delicate cough echoing beneath carved ceilings. These furtive episodes, veiled by polite smiles and quick diversions, fueled rumours that the Queen herself carried the scourge of Syphilis maladie française within her very blood. In the sanctum of her private boudoir, Marguerite endured treatments as secretive as they were archaic. Beneath a canopy of carved oak, she reclined upon cushions scented with lavender, while servants brought steaming bowls infused with mercury vapours. The air grew heavy with metallic mist, its acrid sting forcing her lungs into trembling effort. To mask the telltale odour, distilled cedarwood oil was added to the mixture, filling the chamber with a pine-sharp fragrance that cloaked the medicine's true nature. After these suffocating sessions, her loyal apothecary applied plastered bandages soaked in arsenic-laced salves, carefully wrapping each ulcer to ensure no trace escaped the satin folds of her gowns. Each dawn found her body weakened by the poisons meant to cure, her once graceful step reduced to a wary shuffle across marble tiles. Marguerite's concealed suffering did not remain entirely hidden from the political stage. Both Catholic hardliners and Huguenot partisans seized upon the rumours of her stained innocence, weaponizing them in pamphlets and pulpit sermons alike. To the former, her illness became proof of divine reproof for her leniency toward Protestants. To the latter, it signalled the corruption at the heart of Valois intrigue. As alliances shifted, her marriage, once a symbol of unity, floundered under the weight of scandal. Although King Henry IV tolerated her presence at court, their political bond weakened, and many proposed that the Queen's alleged impurity justified annulment or estrangement. Worst of all, the Queen's reputation for cultured grace was tarnished by insinuations of moral decay, leaving her caught between religious fervour and personal disgrace. Yet Marguerite turned her own pen to these shadows, weaving her experience into verse and memoir. In private letters, and later autobiographical fragments, she likened her body's ravaged flesh to the fractured state of France itself. Two wounds, one corporeal, one political, each mirroring the other in their slow, inexorable spread. Decades after her death, playwrights and novelists of the 17th and 18th centuries resurrected her story in tragedies that emphasized her physical scars as symbols of national trauma. Gothic sketches portrayed her in dark cloisters, her gaze haunted by both the French disease and the kingdom's religious convulsions, ensuring that no future reader could separate Marguerite's literary legacy from the painful spectre of her private affliction. Thus, the life of Marguerite de Valois reveals how a queen's concealed illness could ripple through art, faith, and diplomacy. In the hush before slumber, her tale drifts like a weary lullaby, a reminder that behind salon laughter and courtly refinement, unseen battles were waged in tender flesh, shaping both individual destiny and the fate of a nation. The fifth woman, Marie Mancini. Born in the year 1639 to the illustrious Mancini family, Marie arrived in the glittering court of King Louis XIV of France, the fourth monarch to bear that name during the heady decade of the 1660s. As the beloved niece of Cardinal Mazarin, she entered Versailles with the air of a muse, her bright eyes and vivacious laughter captivating the young Sun King himself. In those early days, their whispered affections transformed private corridors into secret stages, where a stolen glance or a pressed hand spoke volumes beneath the rustle of silken draperies. Yet even as their romance blossomed, the scales of power soon tipped against her, and in the year 1667, Marie found herself torn from royal favour and sent into reluctant exile. Shortly after her departure, court gossip took on a darker hue. Whispers circulated of a slender hand bound in linen bandages, of clandestine visits to the king's own physicians under the pale moonlight. In letters penned by the shrewd Pompon de Bellièvre, ambassador to the court, he referred to Marie's lingering torment, noting that her once radiant glow had dimmed under frequent bouts of fever and unexplained wounds. Servants claimed that she would slip away from grand fêtes, her carriage hidden behind trimmed hedges, to seek relief from pain that no courtly comforts could soothe. These furtive moments, glimpsed through keyholes and hushed anteroom doorways, fueled a growing certainty. The former royal mistress carried within her the dreaded pox, the royal disease that knew no respect for rank or affection. In Versailles' hidden apothecary chambers, Marie submitted herself to the era's most severe treatments, what courtiers would later call the royal remedy. She swallowed small metallic pills of mercury, their taste bitter as tears, intended to purge the infection from her blood. At dawn, she would apply corrosive salves to her skin, ointments so caustic that they threatened to rend flesh as they sought to banish the unseen intruder. Personal notes, preserved in a faded journal, speak of nights spent shivering beneath damp blankets as the mercury's fever raged through her veins, and mornings greeted with trembling hands and the acrid scent of arsenic on her breath. Each trial left her body weakened, her spirit frayed by the knowledge that even the might of Louis's court could not spare her from this hidden anguish. Exiled to an Italian villa beyond the reach of Versailles' gilded mirrors, Marie married a minor duke, his title grander than his fortune, and retreated from the world that had both adored and rejected her. There, amid olive groves and cypress shadows, she endured the disease's lingering aftermath. Joint pains that flared with every coastal wind, fatigue that clung to her steps like a second skin, and moments when her gaze would cloud with memories of lost courtly splendour. Her letters to friends in Paris speak of days spent wandering deserted arcades, of evenings reading devotional texts by flickering lantern light, and of a body that betrayed her with each new ulcer and tremor. In those quiet reflections, she revealed the true cost of a love that had soared on royal favour and fallen beneath the weight of concealed illness. In the Age of Enlightenment, writers seized upon Marie Mancini's story as a critique of absolutist rule and courtly excess. Satirists painted her as the ailing mistress, a poignant symbol of how power's brightest lights could cast the darkest shadows. Pamphlets depicted her once-cherished frame draped in mourning shawls, her illness portrayed as a moral lesson in the perils of passion. Centuries later, historians remain divided. Some argue that her symptoms align unmistakably with advanced syphilis, while others suggest stroke or autoimmune disorders better explain her decline. Yet whether legend or fact, Marie's legacy endures as the lovelorn Duchess, whose brief radiance illuminated the court of the Sun King, even as the hidden pox dimmed her bloom. And so, as the night deepens around us, the story of Marie Mancini drifts like a soft, final breath, a lullaby of love's rise and fall, of hidden afflictions within velvet-slippered halls, and of a heart that beat fiercely, however briefly, beneath the weight of royal intrigue and private suffering. And now, as our journey through the hidden corridors of history draws to a close, let us breathe deeply and allow the gentle cadence of these stories to lull us toward rest. Imagine the soft glow of candlelight fading to a whisper, its warmth retreating slowly into the dark, just as our thoughts drift ever more quietly toward slumber. In the hush that follows, recall the lives we have touched, 5 noble spirits who bore their secret burdens with as much dignity as they could muster, even when the world around them glittered with crowns and courtly splendor. Tonight, these tales remind us that behind every grand facade, there may lie a quiet struggle, and that compassion for unseen suffering need not wane with the passage of time. The value of empathy, the strength found in vulnerability, and the perseverance of the human heart shine like distant stars through the veil of history's night. In their courage, we find our own comfort, that even in solitude and pain, one need never walk entirely alone. Feel your eyelids grow heavier now, as the final embers of these narratives glow softly in the corners of your mind. Let the cadence of each whispered confession mingle with the rhythm of your breath, slowing with each exhale, until all that remains is gentle stillness. The ache of human frailty eases as you surrender to the sweetness of rest, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow's dawn will bring new light and new stories to soothe and inspire. May the legacy of these 5 women sleep quietly alongside you, their whispers of resilience and grace weaving through your dreams like a lullaby. And as you drift beyond the threshold of wakefulness, know that the true treasure of their lives is the compassion they teach us, the enduring reminder that kindness is the balm that heals hidden wounds and that understanding lights the path through shadowed nights. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams be gentle, your rest be deep, and your heart be light. If you would like to join us again on another voyage through history's softest echoes, please subscribe to our channel. Tomorrow we will bring you new stories tender, true, and awaiting your quiet curiosity. Until then, sleep well, and whisper back to the night your own secrets of hope and healing.